Welcome to McGuire on Wrestling.
Allow me to reintroduce myself.
With Mike McGuire.
Stand up, son. Let me take a good look at you.
This guy's a serious professional.
You know what I want to talk about?
Yeah.
Well, the professional wrestling. Do I have your attention now?
Done shilling. I'm done shilling, okay?
Let's get this show on the road.
I love professional wrestling.
Welcome to the show, part of the Celebrate Wrestling Podcast Network on the radio and online. My name is Mike McGuire, and this hour, we've got a lot of pro wrestling to talk about. Some breaking news to come out over the last little bit here, as we found out a couple of beloved, nostalgic characters no longer with the WWE. We found out that R-Truth has been notified his contract will not be renewed, so he's being released by WWE, as is Carlito, who was also a Judgment Day comic relief character. Of course, Carlito made a big return a while back at a Royal Rumble, and then became a big part of Backlash in Puerto Rico, and then kind of just didn't really have much to do, and it's kind of evident why they're not renewing his contract. So we'll talk more about that coming up in just a bit. The Wrestling Observer's Dave Meltzer will be here, and a very special guest, someone I've known for a long, long time now. One of the people out there that Kenny Omega himself credits as training him to become the wrestler that he is today. A guy from Winnipeg who is known around the world as the Zombie Killer Mentallo. And it's the first time that I've actually sat down and chatted with Mentallo, who is a mainstay on the independent scene. He's been a champion numerous times over. He's been around the world, and he'll tell you a bit of his story. If you don't know much about him, a full independent spotlight will be coming up with Mentallo on the podcast feed, but you'll get a clip of that today here. I want to give a big shout out to Canadian Wrestling's Elite, CWE, as well as Pure Power Wrestling. There's been a bunch of pro wrestling going on in my neck of the woods here. CWE were in Medicine Hat, Alberta this past week, as were PPW, but two totally different shows. One was a free open festival show, and they were actually doing 3 different shows throughout the weekend here in PPW, and then CWE doing their cross-Canada tour with the Cowboy James Storm. Now, I did tell you guys I was going to try and get Cowboy. This is no fault of his own, no fault of my own. It's just sometimes these timing things happen. And if you haven't heard already, Cowboy James Storm got signed on to be a part of a movie that's coming up. And so he actually had to pull himself from this CWE tour for a few dates to fly down to Los Angeles to film some movie shots. So unfortunately, I don't have a conversation to share with you about Cowboy, but I can tell you the experience of meeting him, and we might dive into that a little bit more as the show goes on here. But just one of those guys who I feel is duly respected in the business. Of course, he came in as part of America's Most Wanted back in the day. That's where he really got his break in the original TNA wrestling, and then went on to be known tons of places. Had a brief hiccup of an appearance in NXT there, and we've seen him on TV all over the place. TNA World Champion, several-time World Tag Team Champion, 7-time NWA Tag Team Champion as well. So he's got a lot on his resume that looks good, but the guy that I saw in the ring was still loving it, still bringing his A game, still dressing the part, still looking the part. Everything you would see on TV is what you got from Cowboy James Storm here. So I got nothing bad to say about the guy. Unfortunately, just the timing didn't work out. So that's part of what led to this conversation with my friend Mentallo and several other indie spotlights you're going to hear over the next coming weeks here. And we've got some incredible stories coming up for you. I'm not saying that just to hype the podcast. I've never had this happen where I interviewed someone and they hit me with a part of their story that was probably bigger than their wrestling story, and I had no idea about it until I put 2 and 2 together. And that happened with someone who you'll hear from in a couple weeks here on the show. But that's what this show is about. We do talk about the business side, the creative side of professional wrestling, and whether you're a fan or not, I think you'll find the conversations interesting. If you find yourself being a fan of these shows and what we do, please consider supporting the podcast feed and the radio show. You can do that by purchasing merch at CelebrateWrestling.com. But if you join our Facebook page and DM me from now to June 15th, you can actually save money on your shirts, save money by getting some free stickers, and more. All the details at the Celebrate Wrestling Facebook page. Join that now. And again, we appreciate your support so much. I've been mailing a ton of shirts out lately all over the world, which is so cool. I love doing that. The post office knows me now, and we have conversations. So where are these ones going? And I give them my little packages of t-shirts and whatever, and off they go. So if you want more details on that, Celebrate Wrestling on Facebook is where you can find the conversation. Now, it's been a very news-heavy week this week. We're going to talk a little more about the business than we normally do this week with Dave Meltzer from the Wrestling Observer, who is standing by. But we're going to pick apart some other stories, which we like to recap every week in the top 5, known as the 5 Count.
You want to hear the breaking news?
AEW's All Out is coming to Toronto. We knew this a few weeks ago when it was announced, and tickets have gone on sale. So far, tickets are moving along quite nicely. They've released almost 9,000 seats, and about 70% of that has been sold now, with the number going up, obviously. Now, they'll likely increase the tickets upon demand. However, AEW's All Out, the first time in a while that they've done a Canadian date here, and still no plans to go any further into Western Canada at this time. But we'll keep you posted if anything changes there. Now, unlike previous editions of All Out, they're actually waiting about a month from All In to have this pay-per-view, which will be a nice break for us wrestling fans, actually be able to pace out our pay-per-view viewing a bit. But don't worry, WWE's still there to counter-program, subscribing to their continuing theory that more is in fact more. Well, a bit of a bombshell in the Janelle Grant lawsuit against Vince McMahon, WWE, and former talent relations head John Laurenaitis. Laurenaitis has now been dropped from the lawsuit in exchange for offering evidence to the accusers. This announcement came out earlier this week, and it came as a surprise to many following the case. However, this isn't the first time that Laurenaitis has tried to distance himself from McMahon. He, along with Vince McMahon, other WWE officials and other figures have been accused of human trafficking in a widely publicized case that, even though it hasn't gone to trial, is believed to be the start of the downfall that took Vince McMahon out of WWE. We'll talk more with Dave Meltzer about this story coming up. Speaking of Vince McMahon, it looks like he's taken some of that money he made from selling his stock in WWE and has now reportedly started a new company called 14th and 1, which, according to former WWE executive Brad Bloom, now has him as president of the company and describes it as a private investment firm focused on sports, media, and entertainment sectors, flexible long-term capital and strategic partnership, primarily targeting buyouts and majority deals. So we'll get some more insight on this, but it sounds like it's going to be a holding company similar to TKO. However, not in the same scale. Now, 14th and 1st Streets in Washington, D.C. is where Vince McMahon Sr.'s Capital Wrestling Corporation was originally held back in the day, so that's where the name comes from. AEW's All In takes place from Texas coming up on July the 12th, and WWE has offered a litany of counter-programming that day, including NXT's Great American Bash, which will start earlier in the afternoon, followed by a Saturday night's main event taping, and Evolution 2, the all-women's pay-per-view, or PLE, which will take place on the following Sunday, the 13th. Now, no matches have been announced for any of these shows yet. However, it is fast approaching, and we'll see what they do to try and counter AEW's All-In Stadium show. And some shocking news coming out of the release department in WWE. We talked about it earlier, but Ron the Truth Killings, a.k.a. R-Truth, as well as Carlito, the latest to be released from WWE. In fact, just before recording, Carlito posted that his contract is up in 2 weeks and it will not be renewed. Now, he did make some jokes about stealing money from the company, which, I mean, you know, it's subjective, objective opinion. But at the same time, Ron Killings, R-Truth, has been with the company in this latest run for the last 17 years and recently finished off his televised matches with that match against John Cena on Saturday night's main event. Coming up, we'll talk to the Wrestling Observer's Dave Meltzer about all these stories, plus we'll have a clip of our upcoming independent spotlight on the zombie killer Mentallo. Joe Aguinaldo joins me, and more.
This is McGuire on Wrestling.
the alternate commentary table, ACT, brought to you by the Celebrate Wrestling podcast feed. Listen, it's Mitch, it's Dimitri. We got this little pod thing that we do every single week where we talk about the week in wrestling and the way in which we do it from the other side of the railing, right, Mitch?
I like that.
We're coming at it because we love it. We hate it. The alternate commentary table, ACT. Download it anywhere where you're getting your podcasts. Sure.
It's time for the Wrestling Observer Insider with Dave Meltzer, McGuire on Wrestling.
Well, Dave, you can see it in the camera, but I'm wearing my R-Truth 24/7, 48/7, 7-Eleven, I-95 South European Television Championship shirt today. R-Truth, Raw and the Truth Killings, no longer a part of WWE. This is after just having that match with John Cena on Saturday night's main event. 53 years old, been in the company off and on for a long time. You know, I think a lot of fans understand the business side of it, but still a pretty big loss as we're seeing a lot of the wrestlers speak out this morning about R-Truth leaving. What are your thoughts?
I mean, it's a numbers game. This happens to everyone at the end of their career, and they're bringing in a lot of new people to the main roster. And so when you make additions, you're going to make subtractions. And if you look at that roster, I mean, he was older and he was not being used that much. And he was on the lower end of that roster. And if you factor in the age, he was natural to be cut. You know, I mean, it's just how the business operates.
So that's the business side of it. And I think, like I said, I think we all understand that. But I mean, this guy's career spans back so far. I mean,
yeah. He's
time
got
in WWE.
30 years in wrestling, which is a long run for someone who was never like tippy top superstar. You know, it's one thing when you're a guy who, you know, was, you know, stone cold if he was still around, which he's not. But someone like that, you know what I mean? Or John Cena or something like that, you know, you can go forever. But, you know, R-Truth, you know, at his level to go as long as he did, you know, because of the comedy thing really kept him on TV. He was really good at that. And, but it wasn't going to last forever. I mean, it's just like, you know, if you use a previous generation, you know, it was like Jimmy Valiant, who was actually a much bigger star. But, you know, that character, you know, at some point, younger guys come in and faster guys come in and, you know, the gimmick runs its course. I mean, he was a cameo guy, and you can go without cameo guys. I mean, it wasn't, you know, it's the decision as far as it goes. You know, I mean, I wasn't surprised. I mean, I knew that there's several people that are probably going to be cut, you know, and it always happens. He escaped a lot of cuts.
Mm-hmm. I think maybe that Cena match at SNME might have been an internal farewell to him.
In hindsight, it looks like it was like one last thing to do with him is to blow off that feud since they'd been, you know, and give him something on the way out, you know, give him just some exposure. Maybe it'll help him on the indies and everything like that. But it was just a storyline. I mean, like, look, he was only there to get Cena over as a heel. It wasn't for him. It was for Cena. But, you know, it was an effective 5-minute thing on Saturday night's main event to get Cena over as a heel.
But I mean, you could also argue that Cena could have easily. I mean, Cena's never a guy to say no, but I mean, as far as the lineup, like, a lot of people were questioning that match going into it.
Well, it's because
why R-Truth? Why R-Truth? And now
they were looking for a 5-minute easy match. They weren't looking for Cena to do a back and forth good match. There aren't a lot of those left in Cena's body. So, you know, you do a nice little gimmick match with someone who has talked about, you know, it makes sense. I got it. You know, I mean, it's just pro wrestling. You know, I mean, it's one of those aspects of being, you know, in you know, WWE is a sports team, even though it's not a sport. And that's what happens in a sports team is that guys are going to get cut all the time. You know, some that are very entertaining, some that the fans like, but it's just, you know, I mean, either that or you don't bring anybody up from NXT ever.
Well, and you can even liken it to a long-running TV show, right? Like, I mean, shows like The Walking Dead and Game of Thrones made it incredibly popular, where you would take top characters and off them just to bring new ones in and cycle through. So, if anything, those shows were following a pro wrestling model back in the day, you know?
You could say that, you know. But, I mean, it's a sports model. It's not a pro wrestling model. Sports did it long before pro wrestling.
That's what I mean. But just from both sides, from the entertainment side and the sports side, you can kind of cycle them through both ways. Yeah. Okay, well, we'll talk more about R-Truth here coming up on the show. But right now, of course, we got you here. One thing we didn't talk at all about, tickets are now on sale. Tickets have been sold. and doing well so far for AEW All Out Toronto. This was a big announcement. This is their first time back in Canada in some time. Still just doing Toronto. No plans, it looks like, to move west. I have inquired a couple times. They've changed media reps, and this one doesn't quite directly answer as many questions to me as maybe past ones did here. But I was asking, are we going to see a return to Western Canada at all? And no response. So that tells me no, at least not right away. But they are coming back to Toronto here with All Out. This probably makes sense in a lot of ways. I mean, you get that crowd from Detroit, Windsor area as well can come up for this. Like, there's a ton of people from both sides of the border that can come up for this, and a lot of people from Canada that will likely fly down to go to this show here. What are your thoughts on All Out Toronto?
I mean, Toronto's a great market for them. The last time they did a pay-per-view there, they sold out. And actually, it was the biggest gate that they have ever done in North America was the last time in Toronto. I mean, the Arlington show has already sold tickets to pass that record. So it's technically still first until July 12th. But it's a great market. It's a historically great wrestling market. So to me, you want to run a big show there once a year, without a doubt, maybe more. But, the way that they cycle and everything once a year is right.
So, yeah, they haven't opened the full bowl yet, obviously. They've got levels in that arena if they want to go up a level and start adding more seats. But so far, they're about, last count I saw was about 60, 70% sold, maybe a little more than that now. And it's looking like it's going to be a decent show here. As far as the date goes, we're not doing all in, all out again, which is nice.
Yeah, they're giving it, August 20th. Whatever it is, the last week in August. So it's a 4-week build.
Basically a full month, yeah. So
4 week, yeah.
So that'll be a good build for it as well. And I have no doubt that if they go for this, they will sell out at this number. And they'll probably add seats, so it'll be a good turnout for them. Pound for pound, our guys on the Greek show, the alternate commentary table yesterday, were talking about this. And it's hard not to agree with it, especially when you look at the latest round of ticket prices and meet and greet prices and everything else. Has AEW got an opportunity now to become that family-friendly, that budget-friendly major production moving forward versus WWE?
It just depends. It's more based on the ticket demand. I mean, the funny part is that because WWE is more popular and they're selling out, the fact is they are the family-friendly company. It just costs a lot of money to go to the shows. AEW doesn't have that demand. If they could get the demand to that level and have lower ticket prices, but people don't judge by that. It's like saying could some artists that I've never heard of become the more family friendly than Sabrina Carpenter or Taylor Swift, and it's like, or appeal to younger girls because the ticket prices are lower, and it's like it doesn't work like that. Can this fighter become the family-friendly fighter because he's not going to charge as much for tickets as Canelo? And it's like, it doesn't really work that way. It's just in real life. It's like when
people want to see superstars.
People want to see who they perceive as superstars. I mean, I remember, and this goes back to the 90s when Kip Fry took over from Jim Herd running WCW, and he really wanted to learn because he was not an expert on wrestling, and he asked fans, what could we do to sell more tickets? And the fans would go, cut the ticket prices, okay? Cut the ticket prices, and they sold less tickets. It's like there is a point where yes, you're pricing people out of the market, but when you're selling out, you haven't hit that point, and that's the whole thing that has been why WWE is like it is, and why it will continue to be like it is. When you are not selling out, then you probably shouldn't be raising prices. So but it's not one of those things like, oh, people are priced out at WWE, they're going to go to AEW. That just doesn't. It sounds good. It never works like that in real life.
When Garth Brooks announced his Vegas residency years ago at the Wynn Hotel, I had a chance to attend that, and I'd been to other Garth shows, and Garth's shows were famously never more than like $30, $40, maybe $50 a piece. And that was kind of why he sold so many tickets. And of course, he was Garth Brooks as well. He did say in the press conference, for the first time raising his tickets over $100 in his career, that the reason why they did that is because in Vegas, especially, Steve Wynn told him there was a perception that if your show is less than $100 to get into, it's not a good show. And
Zane Breslov told me that in the 90s when he tripled the prices for WCW tickets and ticket sales went up, not down. People going like, you're crazy. There's not this interest. People won't pay $30 for a wrestling ticket on average. And they sold more tickets. And then Vince followed by tripling his ticket prices too. But it was Zane Breslov who did concerts. And it was the thing that he told me is like, if you go out and you're an $8 ticket, you're going to a cheap ass show because we want to be a major league show. So we got to charge $30 a ticket. And people complained, and more people bought tickets. So, I mean, it helped if they got hot, but but that's what happened. And that's what happened originally with WWE and Vince, coming from the days of $4 and $5 tickets, it was harder for him mentally to keep raising past a certain level because he didn't want to price out the families and everything.
Yeah.
But these guys don't have that qualm. Because they're in, their business is maximizing revenue and they'll react when people stop coming to matches. So it's like, that's what causes the ticket prices to rise. And Vince would have risen them too. Vince, elastic tickets and secondary market taught everyone, that again, like AEW has, when they were hot, they're not there right now, but when they were hot, AEW, there was a show in Orlando that they did. It was a pay-per-view. And I think they didn't, I don't remember what the gate was, but it's probably about 800,000. But I remember the scalpers, because they priced it so low, the scalpers made well over 800,000 in profit. So it's kind of like the only people who are making money is the scalpers because the people they're going to buy your whole thing if you're priced too low. And then they're going to jack up the prices to what they can sell it for. So even if you go in there with the idea, it's all going to be dependent upon how hot you are. That's what's going to determine the ticket prices in the end, whether you charge them or whether the secondary market charges them. The reality of ticket prices is going, people go, oh, I hate the secondary market. And it's like, yeah, we all do. But guess what? It's the secondary market that taught TKO, AEW, concerts, everyone what the real value of these ticket prices were. And that's why they're so high, because they had been underpricing for what the market wanted for popular events. If you're not a popular event, you could charge $1 for a ticket and most people aren't going to go.
That's it, right? There's always a free band playing somewhere. It doesn't mean they're going to sell out, right?
Yeah.
It's funny, though, you mentioned the old Vince prices. I posted a photo. I was I'm finally getting my place settled, and I have a lot of old wrestling show posters that I've been to. Monday Night Raw, Monday, July 7th, 1997. Bret Hart on the poster. It was at the Edmonton Coliseum back then. Tickets on sale now, $25, $20, $15, and $12. Can you imagine that now?
Well, that was 97, yeah. That was before. That was after WCW had already raised the prices to like the $30, $35 average.
Right.
Yeah. And they followed WWF then followed suit, yeah.
I don't think they listed the floor prices there, because I think I paid like $40 for my floor like row 3 seat there then, which is still insane to look at now. But all right, well, speaking of business, let's jump over to business. And you brought up Vince McMahon's name, announcing a new holdings company.
Well, he hasn't announced it. He hasn't announced it. I actually checked with them. But okay. I mean, it's out there. It's out there. The news is out there. I mean, it's been known. God, I'm thinking that, God, I wrote it. It feels like close to a year ago when I actually wrote it, about that. I didn't know the details. I didn't know the name. This is the news is that the name of the company is out. But I mean, as far as being a company and Brad Blum being like one of the head guys and everything, I mean, I know, I heard from Vince's people immediately that he was starting a company and that it was not going to be a wrestling company. But that was all I really heard. It's going to be some sort of entertainment company. And it looks like it's more going to be a company to fund smaller sports ventures and smaller entertainment ventures, companies. So it'd be like a backing company to help, kind of like something that would probably like fund like the deal that Hogan's doing, the real American freestyle wrestling, that they would put money into these new ideas if they thought that they were good ideas. So I think that's what the concept of Vince's company is. Perhaps they could do wrestling. I mean, I never heard, but I don't know. I can't see him. I can't see him doing wrestling. I mean, like his company itself is not going to do wrestling. You can't start a wrestling company at a level bigger than TNA is, and to Vince, if he was going to want to do a wrestling company, it's smaller than TNA. He wouldn't want to do it. I mean, it would just be too humiliating for him.
this theory resurfaced again. Jonathan Coachman was vocal about it on X, talking about how
he knows nothing about business.
Okay, I got to get it out before we talk about it.
Nothing about business, because if he did,
I got to get it out before we talk about it, though, Dave. I got to get it out for the people who don't know the story. Okay, and he is saying, and he says he's been saying that Vince McMahon is trying to buy back WWE. Now I will let you retort.
he can't. There's your answer. He can't. He doesn't have the money, and they're not going to sell. So it's pretty much. Would Vince want to? Sure. Once he sold, it was like his power's gone. I mean, he does have stock in the company. He's got whatever it is. You know, it's a sizable percentage, but it's like 8%. You know what I mean? Whatever the number is, 7-8%. So it's like he can't buy the company because he has 7 or 8%. I mean, if he raised, I mean, first of all, they're merged with UFC, they're merged with PBR, they're merged with, several other things. So if he wants to buy, he's got to buy all of them. And to buy all of them, it's going to cost him $40 billion. And he does not have $40 billion. And to raise $40 billion for all that is going to take, so much debt that it's essentially impossible. And they would have to want to sell, which I don't think those people in charge now want to sell. So it's an impossibility for Vince.
That's the big thing that I think everybody's ignoring in this, and fans get all excited and they want to believe the conspiracy theories and the hype. And like when they're announcing record profits every month, why would I want to sell that? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I did want to get your thoughts on it only because it had entered.
I mean, I saw that, and it's kind of like the only thing I saw is like, Coachman, like, nothing about business. I mean, it's like anyone who's anything about business knows that he can't buy this company. It's like people think he's like Bill Gates, and he's a super rich guy, but it's like Lorenzo. I'll give you an example, Lorenzo Fertitta, right?
Okay.
Lorenzo Fertitta, I know this is a fact. He would love to buy UFC back, but he can't. He would love to buy it. He wished he never sold it.
Right.
But he did. He sold it because he had his reasons. Vince sold it because he had to. But in both cases, when they sold it, it's like they can't get it back, and I'm sure both want it back.
We're talking to Dave Meltzer. This is McGuire on Wrestling, part of the Celebrate Wrestling podcast network, as well as on the radio and online. Coming up, we're going to talk a little bit more about business and legalities. Plus, WWE announces the return of a once lauded pay-per-view PLE event. That and more on the way.
This is McGuire on Wrestling.
CKXU-FM 88.3 in Lethbridge is Southern Alberta's true alternative radio station.
The cream of the crop. Nobody does it better.
Proudly carrying McGuire on Wrestling every week.
Yeah.
If you're looking for something different to listen to,
This is going to be a slobber knocker.
check out our NCRA award-winning lineup of programs or stream us anytime at ckxu.com.
Welcome back to McGuire on Wrestling.
We're back with Dave Meltzer from the Wrestling Observer and WrestlingObserver.com. And Dave, we talked a little bit about Vince McMahon and the kind of internet fever that was going on about him possibly buying back WWE, and we've already kind of debunked a lot of that. So let's move forward now into side of legalities here, and some big news dropped. We don't talk about the lawsuit that often right now because we tend to take a little more positive approach to the news as much as we can anyways. But John Laurenaitis has now been dropped from the Janelle Grant lawsuit. For those that don't know, John Laurenaitis was basically Vince McMahon's right-hand man while running the company for years, if not decades. And
I wouldn't call him that, but he was head of talent relations.
Okay.
Which is all interesting because of the timing. I mean, which nobody really picked up on, and I didn't even really think about it until whatever day it was, Wednesday, Thursday, where it was like, when did, because John got dumped from head of talent relations in 2012.
Yeah, but Laurenaitis, he was in the inner circle. I think that's fair.
He was one of the more powerful guys through 2012. Yeah. And then he was a producer for a while. They didn't fire him. And he had his own scandal that Vince had to cover up in 2012, which is probably some of the reason why he got dumped. Although when he did, it was kind of like, the word was, he wasn't really that good at his job. Well, then 9 years later, Vince puts him back. And if you look at the timeline of everything in the Janelle Grant lawsuit and the timeline of him being put back, boy, is that curious. Because he was put back after all the stuff with Vince and Janelle Grant started. It wasn't like he was already in that position, and that's what really surprised me when I wrote it up. But the whole point is like, he was from whatever it was, 2021 until the Wall Street Journal story broke. He was head of talent relations. So he's one of the more important people during those couple-year period, yeah.
Well, now he's been reportedly dropped from the lawsuit in exchange for offering evidence to the accusing party, the Grant party here. So, I mean, a lot of people are going, oh, Vince is in big trouble now, but
he probably is.
Do you see this being as devastating as what they're saying it could be?
Yeah. I mean, because if it wasn't, why would they drop him from the lawsuit? You know what I mean? If he didn't have anything to offer, why drop him? The other thing that is so weird to me is it also tells me that at least his lawyers in viewing the situation probably feel that this lawsuit was not going to stop, because the whole thing right now, the big next step in the lawsuit is the judge has to rule, is it going to go to arbitration or is it going to go to a full-fledged lawsuit? And if it goes to arbitration, John Laurenaitis is scot-free, because arbitration is only going to judge. This is the only thing. The lawsuit would be done. It goes to arbitration because there's a clause in the NDA that it has to go to arbitration. Right. So the judge has to overrule that clause. So if it goes to arbitration, it's a money matter, and it's just, how much more does Vince owe her? Open and shut. How much more money does Vince owe her? John Laurinaitis doesn't owe her any money. WWE won't owe her any more money. It's Vince. So they're off the hook if this thing goes to arbitration. So the fact that he made this move is that his lawyers must have told him it's not going to arbitration. To me, that was the biggest thing of this. The other big one is that he obviously has to know a lot, because why would they drop him from the lawsuit unless he was willing to, unless his stuff is valuable enough to make a difference? So they must believe it's valuable enough to make a difference.
Is WWE itself still in the lawsuit? Are they still named?
Yes. They haven't been dropped. The thing also with that is that, as far as like the value of having him, it has to be, to me, it has to be tangible evidence that he can produce. Because if it's a matter of just testifying against Vince in a lawsuit, I don't think he's very valuable, because his credibility, they could kill his credibility under oath. They could just ruin his credibility. It's not going to be strong. His past is what it is. He'd be massacred. That's from the Vince side. So it has to be tangible evidence that he can produce, or else none of this happens.
Like I said, we don't follow this nearly as closely as you do. I mean, every week I know you've got stories.
There's always been something. Well, there's so many suits. You know, I mean, it's not. There's the shareholder suit. There's the ring boy suit. There's this suit. I mean, there's always something breaking in one of those suits. There's, and there's TKO had 2 more suits filed against them from ex-fighters, and the terms of those suits will likely at some point, go to WWE, because it's the same business model as UFC. And, I'm not saying that they will definitely be sued, but, with the success of the Kung Lee case, it opened the door for a massive lawsuit by ex-wrestlers. It's just that a lot of the ex-wrestlers are they always want to come back, so it's hard to round them up. And also because, other class action lawsuits against WWE have fallen apart because of bad lawyering and statute of limitations and things like that.
Mm-hmm. Okay, well, let's shift over to things that people can watch on TV and follow along here. WWE made the announcement last week that they're going to be having an Atlanta takeover, where Saturday night's main event, WWE Evolution, and NXT's Great American Bash are all going to take place in Atlanta July 12th and 13th. Now, it's interesting. They're doing one of these double up days on the 12th, it looks like, where they're going to have the Great American Bash for NXT come from center stage in the afternoon on the 12th, and then Saturday night's main event happens on the Saturday night, Evolution to follow on the Sunday. So they're really eating up some real estate on July the 12th there.
Yeah. Well, you know why? Because AEW, they were trying to Saturday main event to buck AEW All In.
Yeah.
AEW then moved it to the afternoon, so they felt we're going to move a show to the afternoon. So that's the show.
So this counter programming is, you still feel it's a direct
come on,
rebellion against it?
They're doing it for They did it for AEW's pay-per-view this last week. They're doing it for AEW's next pay-per-view. For the one afterwards, they're not. They're going to Europe the same time.
Right.
Yeah, you know, I mean, it's like when they moved the NXT show head to head. I mean, like if you're going to do 2 shows in the same day, you know, the idea is you probably want to run one at noon and one at like 7. They're running at 3 and at 7, or actually it's 8. They moved because they moved the PLE back an hour. So they're running at 3 and at 8 and the reason the PLE was moved back to 8 instead of 7 was because they wanted to start head to head with what AEW start time, which was 8. Mm-hmm. So they added a show and moved it to 3 p.m. rather than like noon or 1 for that very reason. I mean, you know, it's like they're not going to, you know, like it's like we're going to block them at every turn. And, you know, I think the strategy is starting to backfire on them, but time will tell because it's become too obvious. And, you know, you create the idea that you're whether it's the bully or whatever, you know, if you just ignore it, it's going to be what it is. But they clearly can't ignore AEW. I mean, they could, they just choose to do this. And it makes no sense from their standpoint. They're sacrificing a show that's going to do a lot less viewers because it's going head to head with AEW to hurt AEW. And I don't, you know, we just had the evidence this last weekend from that show. And I didn't get the idea that the AEW show did any less buys, you know, maybe 3,000 to 5,000. It was, if you were going to give me a number to predict and the number that they did, they were identical. Well, I was 1,000 less than they did. Okay. So
I think the distribution is what's probably causing that too, because people know now, you know, especially in Canada and internationally, like we get everything on Netflix or YouTube for the Saturday night's main event. And so it's going to be there for us. We can watch it after.
So what's the point of doing all this other than, I know the point. The point is also because they did so many shows is to just flood the market and have people go like, you know, I can't watch this much. So you drop AEW. But the thing is the last show, and certainly I think All In as well, it's like those are going to be priorities to the people who are into them. And so, you know, I mean, Saturday Main Event would have hurt them. Without a doubt, right. It would have hurt them. I mean, when they announced Saturday Main Event, I said, move to Sunday. The funny thing is I said, move to Sunday, then they were going to move that pay-per-view. Well, and then the Evolution pay-per-view, that was scheduled for July 5th. I mean, they moved it to this weekend specifically to flood the weekend. I mean, they already had a date. They already had a place, you know, July 5th, Uncasville. So they're doing everything they can to spite, you know, and I think it hurts them because I think that less people are going to watch Evolution on a Sunday after watching Saturday Night's Main Event on a Saturday. But it's like they are. That's why I think this is like they've lost sight of everything. They are, and certainly the NXT show by running 2 main roster major shows in the same weekend as NXT. They're hurting the NXT show, even if there was no AEW show. So, I mean, the whole thing is that they are like sacrificing themselves to hurt a company. And I don't think it hurts them. I think it's bad PR in the long run. I think people see through it. And, you know, I mean, people used to always defend, oh, it's a coincidence. Like, you can't say that anymore when it's show out. This week, the July 12th proves it beyond any doubt because they added 2 shows to that weekend to box out AEW. And the NXT show is like the worst weekend possible to run NXT when you're already doing 2 big shows that weekend.
Do you think that's where we see Mariah May make her WWE debut?
Could be. Sure. Yeah, possible.
You know what? I'm just going to go ahead and say it now. We're going to move our production date for this show to July the 14th that day. We're going to do a Monday show again because there's just going to be so much going on again. The last weekend, I hated it, to be honest, because, I mean, I can only imagine with you having to write everything as well. It's like... Yeah,
this was a tough week writing up of the issue. It took a lot of time because they had 3 major shows. That weekend, it's 4.
Yeah. And that's what I mean. So we'll talk the Monday that weekend. But in the meantime, you know, there's still lots of wrestling, lots of great stuff to watch, lots of interesting stuff to watch. I want to say a name to you now, and I want to see if you recall it in your conversations with someone that you're pretty frenzy with. Have you ever heard of the zombie killer Mentallo?
I know the name, you know, from Winnipeg Wrestler, but I don't know much about him. But
he's on the show today. He was coming through the area here, and I've known Mentallo for geez, almost 20 years now, and seeing that. But we've never really done a conversation, a chat, or anything else. But the reason why I bring him up is because he's the guy who Kenny Omega himself credited as being one of his main trainers and main influences. In fact, as soon as we finish the conversation, mentally, he must have it saved on his phone. And I'm not saying this to say he's a nerd for himself, but I would keep it too, of Kenny Omega in a New Japan press conference, I think, and he says, well, it's interesting because Mentallo trained me. So he sent me that clip right afterwards. But this is one of those guys who I feel we're going to be talking about in the long run here. Not as well known maybe to the rest of the world here, but a guy that's definitely seen and done some things. So he's coming up on the show in just a bit here. But I want to see if through your knowledge of Omega's career, how much you knew about him here. But definitely a name worth looking into, and he's still out there, still grinding, still putting on great matches too. But before we go, Dave, as always, like to catch up with you and find out what's going on in the Wrestling Observer newsletter. So what are some things you got for us? Yeah, I mean, the really big story on the Laurenaitis switch. I mean, I go into everything in detail. A lot of the timeline stuff, which is absolutely fascinating looking back at now. Obviously the coverage of Double or Nothing, coverage of Saturday Night's Main Event, which was a big success as a show. Double or Nothing was a big success in the ring and as a business show, I think. And the NXT show as well, and covered situation with BJ Penn. Very sad situation there, with him being arrested multiple times. I think he got arrested again this weekend. He's been arrested 3 times in the last, 10 days. It's really, really sad what happened to him. And, just that, the situation in Mexico, with the WWE faux pas last week. Alberto did win the title, or lose the title, as they told us last week, and tried not to tell us in the slide came up a week too soon. Yeah. Yeah. Tried not to tell people in Mexico, but they all found out, and, which was a weird situation there. And, but yeah, a lot of stuff on the battle for Mexico. We talked about, the United States on pay-per-view, but WWE and AEW and CMLL and AAA, I mean, they're really at it. That's why we're going to be seeing a lot of stuff in Mexico in June. Obviously WWE is doing a big show with AAA on June 15th. AEW and CMLL are going to do the 17th, 18th, and 20th. Right around that time, probably July, August, WWE will officially have bought AAA. It's going to happen. And and then it's going to get really heated because I presume, CMLL is doing great business-wise, absolutely fantastic, but they don't have the ability to pay what WWE or AEW can pay. So I think there may be like a New Japan situation where these really great young wrestlers that they have are going to be offered so much more money that CMLL won't be able to keep them. And, 6 months ago, I looked at CMLL and it's like, they got all these guys, Oscar Dorada and Neon, and these guys that are young and fantastic and going to only get better in the next 5 years. And now it's kind of like, well, they're probably going to be in WWE or AEW because, Mexico's, the top stars in Mexico are going to be open to, Dr. Wagner Jr.'s sons. I mean, they're going to be open to big bidding because both companies are going to want the top lucha talent because they're going to be running, in that market or running with, AEW with CMLL and WWE with AAA, but owning AAA. So they're going to be running, essentially they're going to be running a full promotion, weekly TV and regular shows, WWE in Mexico, rather than like one big show a year. Well, that Worlds Collide is this Saturday, the afternoon before Money in the Bank. Yes. So it's going to be, again, we're going to see what happens here in the future. But I mean, that Worlds Collide show. Do you see Alberto still being a part of AAA, maybe just not in the forefront when WWE is presenting the shows like that? Well, they're going to have to make that decision. I mean, there's a lot of factors in a lot of ways. There's a lot of people who I've heard in WWE who are very high on Alberto, and there's a lot of people who are like, let's not get anywhere near him. His rep in Mexico is very different in the United States. There is not a negative stigma. That's what I mean. Yeah. There is not a negative stigma at all on him in Mexico. There is in the United States. So I wouldn't be surprised if they use him in Mexico at all. I expect that they will for a while anyway. And then United States, I
actually, I don't see a reason for him to work the United States. You know what I mean? Like he's close to 50. He's not great at this. I mean, he's smart at being a heel in Mexico, brilliant at it. But I just don't see. But there's not really a reason for him in the United States. Although, with AAA, I mean, the key reason they bought it was not as much to take over Mexico, but to take over Mexican wrestling. There's a big difference. They know, and we know, and we all know, is that there is more money going forward for Mexican wrestling in the United States. CML's even proven that too, because such a large part of their audience is Americans. Their American audiences. More Americans go to wrestling in Arena Mexico than any arena in the world by far. Yep. And so everyone sees that like Americans are more and more watching Lucha Libre, and it's a much more lucrative market. So WWE, they want to merchandise in the United States. They want to run, big shows in the United States, another brand, but aiming to the Hispanic market. And so the Alberto thing is like to that audience, Alberto is not a negative. He's a positive. However, to people who watch, or in social media or want to bring up stuff, Alberto is very much a negative with his track record. So it's a balancing act. It's a real balancing act. And I don't know which way WWE is going to judge things. I know Nick Khan's theory usually is that if there's no conviction, there's no conviction. You know what I mean? And there is, and with Alberto, there's no conviction. So that probably works in his favor.
All right, well, there you have it. Lots more going on in the week of wrestling this week. We'll tie up again with Dave Meltzer next week to get all the details on that. But Dave, as always, appreciate your insight, and we'll catch you again soon.
Okay, great. Have a great week.
Thank you very much. Coming up next, we're going to talk to the zombie killer, Mentallo.
This is McGuire on Wrestling.
Legends and Champions is your weekly fix to go old school, looking at the classic world of professional wrestling. From Hulk Hogan to the Hitman Bret Hart to the Icon Sting to the total package Lex Luger. We have it all each and every week on Legends and Champions, part of the Celebrate Wrestling Network. And it's available on a Wednesday with me, Andy Evans. See you there.
Welcome back to McGuire on Wrestling.
I have got pro wrestling every weekend for the next 2 months in some form or another. Either I'm working shows or going to be covering shows or watching shows like the rest of you with the busy PLE and pay-per-view weekends that are coming up. But one thing I like about getting out and doing shows is getting the chance to do more and more of these independent spotlight segments we've been bringing to you on the podcast feed for a while. So every once in a while, I'll sit down with an independent wrestler. Sometimes they're relatively new in the scene, and in other times, like this one, it's a guy I've known for a long time. Now, I'm not going to give you the full interview today because we're going to post it as an independent spotlight, and I don't want to double post the entire thing for you, but the zombie hunter Mentallo is someone who, especially in Manitoba, is very well known in the Winnipeg wrestling scene, which has been a tumultuous scene over the decades. And we talk a lot about that, but he's also a guy who's been around the world and has had some amazing experiences. So I'm going to give you just a taste, to quote our good friends in AEW, just a taste of some of Mentallo here, and then you'll have a chance to hear more of that coming up this week on the Celebrate Wrestling podcast feed.
Was it Mentallo off the hop? Were you...
No.
Were you even wearing the mask?
Off the hop, yes, I was wearing a mask, but I was Prince Ali. I was Hysteria. I was actually, you know what? One of my first characters was Flying Panther, and there are a couple of matches where I wasn't wearing a mask. I would say there's maybe 5 or less.
Really?
Yes.
And why the mask? Was it a fandom of lucha? Was it able to hide your identity? Why?
So while I was a big fan of lucha and Japanese wrestling, actually one of the more important reasons I was wearing a mask was to get away from racial stereotypes. I didn't want to be a drug dealer. I didn't want to be a break dancer. I wanted fans to watch my wrestling and respect my talent and ability, not based on race.
Get lost in the character more than who's playing it.
Absolutely. Because, when promoters see someone of color, a lot of them were thinking like, oh, what kind of stereotype can we make this person into? And I didn't want to fall into that trap of having to dance to the ring or, jive talk. And, you know what I mean? That wasn't what I wanted for myself.
Well, you start to get known, you get trained up, you get some experience. Now let's go to Mexico.
Absolutely, yes. And, internet was still very new at that time. So it was very difficult to make connections and find schools and stuff like that. I was lucky enough that CMLL had a website, and I was able to, just get some information on it. And at that time, Dark Angel, Sarah Stock, who was from Winnipeg, was down there. And, she sort of helped me a little bit, get into, what would be considered as the beginning class there. So at that time, Hijo de Gladiador, he was my first trainer there.
Okay, so I'm so interested about this because I've met Mexican guys. I met, I think I told you the story about the time I kind of accidentally booked a show in Mexico at a resort.
Right, yes.
Yeah, we did tell that story. Yeah.
Yes.
And so, just getting to meet these guys and seeing what Mexican wrestling looks like at its very base. You're getting into CMLL.
Yes.
So you're not going to any Mexican wrestling show you can find.
No, I'm shooting at the top.
Yeah.
You're shooting for the head, absolutely.
So, that's got to be a massive opportunity.
It is it's very difficult to get into. You know what I mean? So it's one of those things where you really have to know someone, and someone really has to know you.
Is it harder as a foreigner?
Absolutely, it is because language barriers and it's the top company, so absolutely it's much harder as a foreigner, and especially coming in and not having a name established in at the time, say Ring of Honor or Pro Wrestling Guerrilla or WWE and those kind of places. It was extremely difficult.
So hablas en español?
Muy poco.
Okay. Not bad.
Sí, lo siento, mi español muy mal. Yeah, lo siento. Perdóname.
Yeah. Con permiso. Okay, so when I was getting to know you back when we were having these conversations in Saskatchewan, of all places, one of the things I remember seeing on your T-shirt, one of your T-shirts that I still have. I still have the Mentallo T-shirt, the white one. And wouldn't you know, it's Mentallo in FMW. Does that happen right after Mexico, or does it happen later?
Well, here's the thing is that, so I've never actually appeared in FMW, but when I was in Japan, I was going to a pro wrestling shop which sells wrestling memorabilia.
Right.
And so I was always a big fan of FMW, when I in my teenage years and stuff like that. So I was buying an FMW shirt. Now, when the Smash office and Tajiri saw me buying it, they figured I was a big fan of deathmatch wrestling. So from there, they booked me into for some reason booked me into a barbed wire bat match with Masato Tanaka and Akira Shoji. Jesus. And they wanted me to wear this FMW shirt. And that's when I started coming out to the FMW theme song. And, we went off running from there. So I was never there.
That explains so much now, because I've gone looking for stuff. And,
right.
Okay, wow.
So that T-shirt that you have was to commemorate my first barbed wire baseball bat match in Japan.
And that was in Japan. So that was for
Smash.
For Smash, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Wow. Okay. I didn't know that part of the story.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. Now I know. Was it a lot of hardcore stuff you ended up doing over there? Or
no, it was just the one match. Just the one match. Because that's not my style. It's not my forte. I'm willing to do it. I won't shy away from it, but that's not my cup of tea by any stretch.
See, and the funny thing is, to me, as the zombie killer and this crazy character, and you don't do it as much, I find, but you still have let out the demon scream and things like that when you're in the ring here. That to me would be the ultimate temptation is let's turn this guy into a bloodbath.
Well, I definitely have some hardcore elements to me, but I would say my hardcore element style is more similar to a Great Muta more than actually full on deathmatch wrestling.
So just beat the holy dog poop out of each other.
Violence within pro wrestling.
Yeah,
within that confines of pro wrestling for sure.
That's the next question I have. Your character is so over the top, but you do have a very wrestling based performance. Like I said, you have the demon scream, but you're not in there being a magician. You're not, doing forced throat grips or anything like Darth Vader from across the ring or anything, right?
Absolutely.
So how important is it for you, and how easy is it, I guess, for you to have such an over the top presentation but still keep it grounded in wrestling?
I think because the mask allows me to sort of be a different character or have different aspects of my natural personality come out. Whereas, say, in my personal life, maybe I'm a little bit more reserved at times. So wrestling and being under a mask kind of gives me a bit of confidence to be a little bit more charismatic. You're
a quiet guy. I've often said that about you, just like behind this. No, but seriously, like, when it's not showtime, dude, and it's not that you're antisocial or anything like that. It's just you very much kind of keep yourself sort of guy, and
very situational. Like anyone else, I can probably be a little outlandish at times, but situational.
I don't know. We just had Cowboy James Storm here, and that guy's got no shame. So, by the way, thank you for doing this. We were hoping to get James on, but he's literally got a flight to go do this Hollywood thing like right away, so he had to jam out immediately.
Absolutely.
But we'll get him down the line here. Let's talk about you and brushes with greatness here. There have been tryouts. There's been TV matches.
Absolutely.
What would you say has been the best and most important experience to you over your career?
So the one that sticks out for me, just kind of off the top, was being able to wrestle Kenny Omega in Japan. And from what he has said about the match is that it was voted for, it won Foreigner Match of the Year, but it won Independent Match of the Year, but because it was two foreigners, it got rejected.
Oh.
So there was a little bit of behind-the-scenes politics. So that.
Do you remember what year that was?
2010. Okay. August of 2010. So we're almost coming up on the anniversary of that match.
So Kenny was he still baby oil and blue tights, or was it?
Yeah. That's right. That's right. Yes, he was.
I have these old photos from him coming through Edmonton and just skinny and greasy.
Right. Well, at least he was jacked up by this.
Oh, yeah, exactly.
Yes, but that was still him at that point. Yeah, he wasn't quite the cleaner just yet.
There's just some of my conversation with the zombie killer Mentallo, who you'll hear again on the podcast feed, this time for about a full 20-minute interview, talking about his career, his life and times in Japan, his friendship with Kenny Omega, and a bunch more. And that'll be coming up for you in the coming days on the Celebrate Wrestling podcast feed. Well, over the weekend, some devastating news for this particular program, for this particular host. And I do feel several members of our Celebrate Wrestling community, after his latest 17-year run, not to be forgotten by his previous 3 to 4 year run and TNA run and every other run he's had, but Ron the Truth Killings, R-Truth, not having his contract renewed by WWE. Here to talk about it, our old friend Joe Aguinaldo. Joe, I'm sorry for your loss.
This is kind of a sad day. I got to the R-Truth bandwagon late, but like for a while, he was like arguably one of the most entertaining things during those like years when Raw was not entertaining.
Thank you very much. This is where we got to remember, he earned his MVP status years ago.
Yeah. Like I remember like some like the Independence Day Raw when he's like, I want to, quote the great Will Smith when he said, "Welcome to Earth," or whatever that quote was. It was like that. Like the whole 24/7 title run, 24/7 I-95. Like I'll admit, I have never been the biggest fan of comedy wrestling, but R-Truth he got me to appreciate the lighter side of pro wrestling, and again, like I said just now, he was arguably the most entertaining thing in some not so entertaining Raws that you and I covered for a couple of years.
Well, that's what I was going to bring up. That I remember us in the middle of Tuesday Morning Cooked and being arguably at one of the lowest points of watching Raw because it was just awful. And yeah, he comes out, and he wasn't R-Truth, he was Uncle Sam. Wink.
Yeah.
And and that was when he quoted those famous words, "Welcome to Earth." So
today, we are here to honor those brave American heroes that say, give it up. Those brave American heroes saved the Earth from that alien invasion back in 1996. Will Smith, Jeff Goldblum, and we can't forget our favorite American hero, Vivica A. Fox.
Oh, yeah.
As we honor them, I would like to read my favorite passage from the Constitution. Welcome to Earth.
It was so bad, but it was so good.
It was, and I still go back to, and I don't know if you remember this, Mike, but I do, because it was one of my fondest podcasting memories with you, where like we were recapping that, and then you said "Welcome to Earth," and then we both lost it, and then we had to stop for a sec. Like you said on air, "Hold on a sec, I just knocked my headphones out," and then like you know what I mean? It was like that was like one of the funniest one of the most fun times podcasting that I've ever had, and that was directly because of R-Truth.
Yeah, so I mean, we're not going to sit here like I was trying to talk to Meltzer about this. He looks at wrestling differently than we do, obviously, because he automatically jumps to the business and the math and everything else. That's fine, and I get it, but I think from an entertainment standpoint, from an entertainer standpoint, that this was one of the best performers, hands down. And
I'll admit too, like, you know, there were certain performers that I thought would, you know, even after their in-ring career would have a place in WWE, and R-Truth was actually one of those people, just from, you know, like based on all the the way people talked about him and people react to him. So I'll admit I was a little surprised when I saw that, when I saw the news flash that he had been released.
Well, and Dave insisted that, you know, they needed somebody for John Cena to heel on, and that's why he got the match at Saturday night's main event. I disagree. I think that Ron probably knew this was coming. I think that Cena probably got wind this was coming, and I think now it makes more sense than ever. That's probably why that match happened, because they're not going to do big retirement send-offs for everybody. I mean, no disrespect to the guy, but it's not Ric Flair or Shawn Michaels' last match. You know what I mean? Like, it's not that, and I get that, but he was somebody that was definitely a favorite backstage. He was a favorite to a lot of fans, and we're seeing that with the outpouring of support online now, and everybody wishing him the best and sharing these great memories. So I think it's fantastic. You know, I was going to pull the pin this week and buy the Ron Cena t-shirt from Saturday night's main event, and they're gone. They're gone. But if you want to buy any R-Truth merchandise, they still have a bunch up. They do have like some of his older t-shirts and everything still up, but everything else is quickly going. One of the last figures they put out of him was him wearing the Judgment Day shirt with the R-Truth taped on the bottom. Remember, it was like, you know, and Damien and Rhea and Dirty Dom and R-Truth, right? So, but yeah, it's one of those guys who is pretty well remembered, pretty well loved, and I didn't want to spend like a half an hour talking about him, but I just want to get your thoughts on it. And for me, again, it was always just the entertainer in R-Truth, and that's what I really grew to appreciate and love. And you know me, I love the silly. I don't mind comedy in my wrestling as long as it's a character that isn't supposed to be serious. And R-Truth delivered. So
definitely.
That's it. Anything else you want to say there, Joe?
No, like, again, I'm going to miss the guy.
I highly doubt that he's done, but at the same time, I mean, he's been going for a long time. We always forget that he is an older guy now. I mean, if this is retirement, that's okay too, but I think he's going to have a fair run of signings and maybe some indie shots here and there. Maybe not even wrestling. Maybe he will wrestle. I don't know. I don't know what he wants to do. But the bottom line is, whatever happens, Ron Killing's R-Truth. Totally awesome, and going to be missed seeing him on TV. But 'tis the biz, and it makes way for some new faces, so we'll see what comes next. Joe Aguinaldo chatting about R-Truth today. Thank you, my friend.
No worries, man.
And thank you for listening wherever you are, subscribing to the McGuire on Wrestling and Celebrate Wrestling podcast feed. Look under Celebrate Wrestling, wherever you get your favorite podcasts. Again, the offer exists on the shirts for a little bit longer here. Going to save you some money and save you some postage. Do not order through CelebrateWrestling.com right now. Order through the Facebook page. The price goes up on June 15th. So price will be going up $5 a piece on those shirts. And then they're only around for a limited time because we're going to introduce 2 new shirts going into the summer. But that shuts her down for now. I hope you enjoyed the show as always. Leave your feedback. Leave a 5-star review if you're so inclined. It's truly appreciated. And we'll catch up with you again real soon. Until then, thanks for listening. Letting me do what I do. Play safe. Drive safe. Be seen ya.
McGuire on Wrestling. Online and on the radio. Listen to the show Mondays at 4 p.m. Mountain Time at CKXU.com, wherever you get your podcasts, and at McGuireShow.com.